Congratulations to the brass ensemble. It's very difficult to play together when you're distanced. I heard a story from a musician the other day. There was a socially distanced orchestra that was playing, and some of the musicians said, "You have to gesture bigger. We can't see you." So the conductor had to make it bigger than before so that everybody could see. What do I have? This is certainly my first time talking to a live audience, and or performing, all right, to a live audience in many, many months. It's kind of strange. It's kind of wonderful. It's strange and wonderful to actually be gathered in a group of people this much. I'm encouraged by this institution. I was invited to come here. I have some familiarity with this place. I understand what BARD stands for. I recently worked with a BARD alumni named Alex Coleman on a book. I've written about the BARD Prison Initiative, which I think some of you will be familiar with. And I've read some pieces that Mr. Botstein wrote about music. This place is special. I've been here, visited here a few times over the years. I saw an exhibition at the gallery in 2008. The gallery had been turned into a recreation of the artist Keith Edmire's parents' house with all its extreme 70s decor. It was, it was like walking into a movie set. And you know, as you walk into a movie set, you know that it's all fake, but part of you is still seduced to feeling that you're in that place. There's this kind of wonderful tension in something like that where you know it's fake, but you kind of feel like you're in the place at the same time, between the real and the artificial. And we are in a world that someone has made that is just like the world that this artist made of his parents' house. His world, like our world, is unreliable. It's based on unreliable memory and imagination. We all do this. We make these artificial worlds. The difference is we have to live in them. A world that's made like this, it can be a seductive lie, or it can be a revealing truth. On a thing like this, a commencement, I imagine it's common to ask oneself, well, what comes next for me? What comes for me as I leave this place? Will I be a different person? Will I be a different person than I was a month ago? Well, I think we're all different than we were last week. Things are changing incredibly rapidly. And then you ask, what person am I now? And how should I be as that person? What do I love? What does that entail? What, if any, are there any obligations? Obligations to myself, obligations to a larger community. How does one reconcile oneself between one's personal rights, one's personal desires, and those of the community and the collective? What have I learned here? Has the world changed? Has the world changed since the spring? It probably has. Has it changed into something far different than the world that I knew? Is that a good thing? Is everything I learned here at this institution now meaningless? I don't think so. I'm very sorry for the world you inherit, that we've left you a mess. The one that we made, the world that we made. But there are reasons to be cheerful. The pandemic has pulled back the curtain, which has revealed both the worst and the best of what and who we are. Arundhati Roy, the writer, referred to this moment as a portal, when we have unprecedented opportunity to change things, to cross into another world. In this moment, we have been both cursed and blessed. This is one of those moments that occur once in a while. Ideas that were taken as given, economic ideas, cultural ideas, etc., are being questioned, reconsidered. An era based on a set of biases and assumptions is ending. In a sense, we're lucky. The portal that she mentions is open, and we have a chance to go through it. I'm as guilty as anyone else of waking up in the morning and feeling that nothing really changes very much. I have moments of despair and anger and frustration. No surprise. Martin Luther King Jr.'s quote, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." Some mornings that feels like an empty platitude when I read it and when I look at the news that morning. It sometimes feels like, oh, you know, same as it ever was. But that's not really true. The real constant is change. We often forget or overlook the momentous changes in our thinking that we now accept as obvious, inevitable. But in truth, nothing was inevitable. The changes that happened, that we live with now, for better or worse, they're here because we made them so. Okay, here's a few of them. Slavery is now universally considered unacceptable. 2,000 years ago, Aristotle thought slavery was natural and necessary. But even then, his contemporaries argued that it was unacceptable. These changes don't happen overnight. Okay, here's another one. Women should be allowed to vote. If I said to anyone now, or if you heard someone else say, no, women should not be allowed to vote, you would think that was completely ridiculous. It happened in the United States. It took state by state 100 years ago. In Saudi Arabia, it happened 5 years ago, but it happened. Education, primary and secondary education so far, I think everyone accepts that it should be free. It's a right for everyone to have it. This was not always true. Children were considered cheap labor. Eventually, maybe higher education will be considered a right as well. Interracial marriage. I think we all accept this now. We all accept this. This seems like, what's the big deal? The Supreme Court made a ruling legalizing interracial marriage in 1967, not that long ago. Alabama had some laws on the books that counteracted the Supreme Court ruling, and those were overturned 20 years ago. Okay, gay marriage, okay, we all know that this is now law, this is now legal. When I was a young person, if someone had told me that this will be legal and generally accepted, I would have said, you're crazy. This should happen, but it's going to take forever. But just 5 years ago, in 2015, it was recognized as legal in all 50 states. I can go on. I have infrastructure, clean air, clean water. There's things that don't exist for us entirely now, but we do think of them as our right. And these ideas that we consider as part of our lives and how it is to live and how it is to be, it didn't always have to be that way. It wasn't always that way. This is something new in the world, and the world has changed. These changes weren't predictable, and they weren't inevitable. I'm a little older than some of you, and I can say that some of these changes, they weren't expected. They weren't expected to happen as soon as they did, and when they did, then they seemed inevitable. People make these changes. Things that seemed impossible have happened, and they will continue to happen. Try and imagine what radical, momentous changes in our thinking might happen next. And they will. We can imagine what they might be. Okay, make no mistake, things can go wrong, things can go the other way. This country was ever so slowly inching towards democracy. But as in many other countries around the world, there's been some serious backsliding. There's no guarantee that change will be good. That part is up to us. And so I asked myself, how do these changes happen? Where's the levers? Where's the buttons? What's the process? What can we, as a lone individual, or with a little group of people, what can we do to have an effect? I suppose you might ask yourself the same question. Does my line of work have any wider resonance? Not that every line of work has to focus directly or solely on social justice. I believe that the meaning of what we do in our work and our lives is more subtle than that. I'll use myself as an example. Okay. Most of the time I'm a performer and a musician. And it seems to me that music and performance affects people's view of the world, not directly, not by me writing a song about climate policy or housing inequities, although I might like to do that. Rather, it works in a less didactic and non-kind of text-based ways. It's kind of a language without words. Music creates community. When I was young, I heard music on a little radio that was about the size of a phone. And I realized when I heard this music that there was a world out there that was very different and wider than the little suburban town that I lived in. We've heard people say things like, that song saved my life, or that DJ saved my life, and these are kind of cliches, but there's a truth to it. Music can have that kind of effect. It reveals a larger world, and it brings people together because they know that there are other people out there like them. For someone else, it might not be music that has this effect. It might be the visual arts, theater, cooking, dance. It might be ways of thinking in education, sustainability, even economics. It can touch people who hear about a new idea and it changes their thinking. I also think that one discipline needs to influence all the others. There needs to be a lot of curiosity about what's going on in other disciplines, and one discipline can, in surprising ways, affect another one. When I heard the music of James Brown, I was a young man, I came to realize that here is music where no one part is more important than any other. The melody is not played by one instrument, but it emerges out of the interlocking parts played by all the instruments. The groove is not just played by the drums, but it comes into being as a result of what everyone is doing. I sense that unlike traditional Western music, Brown's music is non-hierarchical. In his musical model, we're given an audio metaphor. We hear, metaphorically, a model of social organization and cooperation that makes us feel joyous and transported. We're not kind of intellectually going through all this, but I feel like we sense it. Here, I sense there's a social and economic argument made with music. And the transcendent feeling it brings when you hear and experience it is more persuasive than language. Music proposes a world. Metaphorically, it gives evidence of that possibility. An economist, hearing James Brown, might possibly see the world in a different way. Of course, my model for cross-disciplinary influence comes from music, but it can go the other way as well. I'm going to mention the first abstract artist, Hilma af Klint, who was influenced by spiritualism that was prevalent at about over 100 years ago, turn of the last century. It had been proposed that one of the reasons for the wide enthusiasm for this spiritualism was because of the scientific discoveries that were happening at that time. The science was showing that there were invisible forces in our world. Electromagnetism, radiation, radio waves, X-rays, the entire world, ourselves included, are affected by these invisible and pervasive forces. Science proposed this world, a world that hadn't previously existed in our imagination. And this affected how these artists worked. They realized that what we see with our eyes is only part of what is there, and artists like af Klint and others began to attempt, via abstraction, to represent this world, a world of energies that can go through buildings and go through our bodies. So, with art and science, we conjure worlds. And over time, we who conjure these worlds, we ourselves change. And then the worlds that we conjure, those change as well. A couple of years ago, after I finished a music tour that lasted almost a year, I decided to go to India. I went to catch a traditional music festival in Chennai. It was wonderful. It was wonderful. I saw a young kid in a kind of Elvis outfit playing Carnatic music on a saxophone. I saw singers communicating with drummers with their hands. And I also went to Kerala, which is another state in the south. And there's a kind of performance there called Kudiyattam. It's an ancient form of dance drama. It's about 1,000 years old. In this dance drama, the performer begins the performance by metaphorically dancing into existence and kind of proposing a world. This will be the world that the story will take place in, kind of like Star Wars or Game of Thrones. It's complete. It has a cosmology. It has a history, every detail. In the dance drama, the world building is not made with sets and props and computers. It's conjured in the audience's imagination via singing and dancing and gesture. Like the actors in this drama, we, in whichever field we endeavor, we also dance a new world into existence. Not just in music or theater, every kind of work and activity we engage in proposes a world. In the end of the Kudiyattam performance, the actors dismantle the world that they have made. Likewise, we destroy an old world, a worn-out world, the one we ourselves of others before us have made, so that a new one can be imagined and brought into existence. Thank you.